This is Henry with EXP. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have the pleasure to be with Karen McGuire with Nations Title, and I wanted to introduce Karen for those that are first-time home buyers, or maybe you just want to buy a home. And I wanted to speak with Karen to explain the title process. So Karen, just so you know, I started this journey a little while ago with my YouTube channel to explain the process when, a buyer is ready to purchase their home. So we all know, so the first step is, to get pre-approved. We recently met with a mortgage lender that explained the difference between FHA loan, VA, and conventional. What are the requirements to get pre-approved? So once we get pre-approved, of course, the buyer, is going to contact a great agent like myself that knows the city, different suburbs of Indy where they want to purchase their home. And so we find the home, we put in an offer, the offer gets accepted. Then comes the fun part, where we go through the home inspection. We go through that process, and if they are financing, whether it's FHA, VHA, or conventional, it's going to be an appraisal with the lender. And we're working with the lender through the whole process because, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of questions that need answers. Okay, so once we get the accepted offer, we'll submit the purchase agreement to our chosen title rep. And I know you've been in this industry for a long time, so I wanted to spend some time with you. And by the way, thank you for taking the time this afternoon to discuss this. But once we get to that point, we submit the purchase agreement. That's the first step for title to engage with the agent and the buyers. So how do we kick that off? What happens?
So once I receive the purchase agreement from you, then I actually look through that purchase agreement and any corresponding documentations that you may send. And then I reach out to both agents, both the buyer's agent and the listing agent, if there's additional information that I should need, which will be, I'll need both the buyer's and the seller's contact information. We need the lender's contact information, things like commission and things like that. And then I forward that on to our title team, which then we go back and we do a search on that property to ensure the services that we provide to the buyer is to protect the buyer's interest and investment. So different things that we do is we go back and do a thorough title search to make sure title is clear of any judgments, of any liens, of any heirs, or anything like that that would hinder the purchase of that home, so we can get all that cleared so the buyer holds title clear and free. Right.
And I know, buying a house today is a little bit different than when we were in the pandemic, right? So, and I think, title is so much more thorough to justify liens, judgments, etc., because that's one thing a lot of buyers, and I know yourself and lenders feel the same way, there was a lot of fraud.
Yes.
Okay, there was a lot of fraud. And so we want to make sure if a buyer is purchasing that house is actually truly available to be sold.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you run into a situation like that, how do you justify that?
Well, what we do, we'll go and look at every judgment, every lien, anything that shows up, or if there's any potential errors that might rear up down the path. And we will go into each of those to make sure those judgments are satisfied, the liens are satisfied. If there's any heirs, we dig deeper into that. We might have to have an heirship affidavit signed that someone is not going to be an heir to that property. And these are kind of like not normal circumstances, but they can occur.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we dig deep to find anything that could possibly stop this. We work very closely with the agents and we work very closely with the lender as we move through this process to make sure that everything is 100% by the time we get to that closing table.
Right, and that's what we want. There are a lot of steps in between there before we hear those magic words, you're clear to close.
Right.
Right. So within that, what are, and I think it depends really on a specific buyer, what their background is, what they have provided to the lender, when it comes to like additional fees, how's the fee structure broke down, just so the buyer knows, because when they walk into a conference room to close, if you're a first-time buyer, it could be very, very overwhelming.
Yes.
Okay, it's got a lot of better over the years. I mean, I remember my first time when I purchased my first house. I think I was in the office for like 3 or 4 hours. Okay, there was papers stacked up in here. Okay, but it's gotten a lot more streamlined. But when it comes to the fees, so buyer, they whatever percentage they're putting down on their property. But there's also going to be some lender fees as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so when it comes to the title fees, how does all that come together?
Okay, first and foremost, when you first decide to purchase a property, you're going to put earnest money down. And
right.
That's what Henry was talking about, that certain percentage.
Right.
And so that can either be held by one of the brokerages, or it can be held by the title company in escrow, which will come back to you at the closing table. But that's just saying that you are wanting to move forward with this purchase and that you're putting a little bit of money down, and that will go towards the purchase of your home, so you do not lose that. But we do hold that in escrow. And the title company is the one that works with all these fees with the lender and makes sure that everything comes to where it needs to be at the end. So we work with all the financing, work with the lender. The additional fees that you might receive are even commission. I don't know if you've addressed that, where the buyer now, with the way the new law is, could pay the percentage directly to the buyer's broker.
Right.
Or that might be something that's negotiated with the seller. So we will need that information as well to see where to pull those funds from at the end. There's other fees, like typically the title insurance is paid for by the seller. Again, everything's negotiable. And typically the loan also has an insurance policy on it too, which is paid for by the buyer. And that's based on the mortgage amount.
Right. And and a lot of buyers, so you got a first-time home buyer, and they don't understand the new rules, like we kind of mentioned here, where there is a commission deal going on right now, where traditionally, when a buyer is purchasing a home, usually the seller is paying that commission for both sides, however. But due to the new requirements, there is an agency agreement that has to be signed to say, the seller, we want the seller to pay the commission. However, if they're not willing to pay the full commission, the buyer's going to be responsible for whatever percentage that's not agreed upon. So all that is in the purchase agreement, all that is explained through title, so they understand these are, what's required from the buyer side, this is what's required from the seller side, these are, the commission breakdown, this is what you need to bring to the table.
Right.
Okay, and what you're going to receive.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's something that, a new buyer might not understand that. And the agent, we have to explain that to them so they understand. And as an agent, I always like to make sure everyone has all the information they need, because I don't want anyone to feel like they, didn't receive the right information, because this is the biggest investment that you'll make, probably in your life, however many times that you actually do it. So we want to make sure everyone feels great, because we want you to leave your closing and enjoy your home for many, many years to come. And that's why, it's great to work with great people, great agents, great lenders, great title reps like yourself. But one question I have, so you've got a family that's making, the purchase, we're preparing to close. But what if that buyer is a company or LLC? What's the difference?
Okay, the difference is we'll ask for some additional paperwork on that, like who can sign for this LLC or corporation or the trust or an estate. There's many different things, and depending on how you are purchasing is the information that we'll request. So let's say or you might have a power of attorney that's signing for you.
Right.
We'll have to have a power of attorney documentation drawn up for that person to sign on your behalf as well. So it's a very legal process that we take very seriously, and we will work with you from the very beginning till the very end, so there's no surprises. We work very closely with your agent. Once we get the clear to close from the lender, we then prepare the settlement statement that shows what the buyer is bringing to the table, what the seller will receive, and your agent will go over that with you. And if there's any questions that you may have, reach out to your agent, reach out to your title company. We'll be happy to answer those for you.
Yeah, and I think if you're working with, and it all comes down to the lender as well. You know, we get to the point where I'm dependent on the lender and you're dependent on the lender as
Right.
well. So that communication. And sometimes, you know, when they go through underwriting, depending on the purchase, depending on the person's financial background, sometimes, you know, it can take, you know, quite a bit. You know, everybody, you know, the typical time frame to close on a property, you know, if they're financed is usually 30 days, maybe a little less. But there's times that you run into issues where it could be pushed out to 45 days.
Right.
Okay? And we're scrambling, we're going back and forth because there's before we actually show up to closing, there's a lot of paperwork that has to actually be, you know, have to be confirmed. Maybe there needs to be a larger down payment, or maybe there's some credit issues that the buyer might have to resolve to be able to close. And usually when it's an LLC, so yeah, power of attorney, articles of corporation, right?
Yeah, you'd have for LLC, we would need the operating agreement and the articles of organization or resolution for those.
And sometimes, and these things do happen, okay? Sometimes the deal just doesn't work out. You know, a buyer might have second thoughts. It's like, well, I thought this was the perfect house for me, but some things in my family life might have changed. Maybe they got, hey, I'm getting transferred to a different state. Or, hey, you know what, we rushing this a little too quick. We want to sit back and think, so we want to, you know, withdraw from the deal, okay? Typically, yeah, there's, you know, different brokerages, agents, they'll hold the earnest money. I personally don't like to do that, okay? I have the utmost faith in my title company, and because the legality of everything, I feel more comfortable with the title company holding the earnest money. Now, when a deal doesn't work out, the buyer says, look, you know, we're just not gonna be able to purchase the home, or the lender says, you know, we can't get them to clear, okay? So we'll have to do a mutual release, and that's if both parties agree to it, okay?
Right.
Both parties agree to it, say, yeah, we agree, just not a good fit. Wish you well, happy trails. So for the buyer to receive their earnest money, okay, that they put down, what's the process to receive that back?
Okay, with that, we'd have to, our key thing is receiving that mutual release that is signed both by the buyer and the seller and both brokerages. Without that mutual relief, with both parties saying, yes, the buyer is going to receive the earnest money back, we cannot send that earnest money back. So there has to be agreement.
Right.
And then it could be, this is very, very rare, it could be that it may have to go to court if the seller and the buyer are just adamant about not agreeing to the full refund or even a partial refund of that money. But we have to have direction from the brokerage with that signed documentation of where those funds are going to go to, and then they will immediately go to back to the buyer if that's what was agreed upon.
And usually, you know, that's worst case scenario. It usually doesn't happen. I mean, 90% of the time, it's pretty much, you know, shaking hands.
I would say 99% of the time. It's just really
99% of the time, it's returned with no issues. So I want to ask you, you know, Karen, I've known you for a while. Like I said, I know you're one of the top title reps in the city. Give us some information about Nation's Title.
Nation's Title, yes. I'm actually thrilled to be with Nation's Title. We work very closely with our agents and our lenders to bring the best services possible to both their sellers and buyers What we want at the end of the day, the title company, is because we're involved from the very beginning to the very end, is to have the most successful closing possible to celebrate both the buyers and the sellers. So one can be happy with their sale and one can be happy with the purchase of their new home and live happily ever after. But with Nations Title, we also do some other things as well. For the agents, we have, net sheet calculators, and we go out and do training with them. I like to refer to myself as a partner, not just a title rep, because if my agent needs something, I'm his right-hand person throughout the transaction to make sure his buyer or seller is happy and getting what they need for a successful transaction. In addition to that, our closings, we have multiple locations to do closings at. We also can do remote closings where we can send a closer to your location if you're unable to get out to one of our locations, and there's no additional fee to you for that. There's many companies that do charge a fee, but we, Nations Title, do not charge a fee. We can come to you, get the appropriate documentation completed so we can complete this transaction, and we can move forward with you either receiving funds for your home or getting into your new home.
Well, and that's great to hear, because, and that was going to be my question, because, I've had some clients that are a little bit up in age and they're selling their home. They're not as mobile as they used to be, and sometimes they're just not able to, to travel, and wherever the location is, and it's just more convenient for the remote closing to send a closer out and do this at their home. I mean, I did one not too long ago where these folks were selling their home. They were actually in a nursing home. Okay, they moved to a nursing home. So they were not able to come in the office. So remote closer went out to do that. And I know some title companies, they'll charge like $250 to go out for their service. And you guys are offering that for free, which you don't see that every day.
Right, absolutely.
And so that's just awesome. That's just an extra, I think it's an extra incentive to work with Nations Title.
Yeah. We just want it to be as easy as possible for you to buy your home or for you to sell your home. Even if you're hospitalized or have someone that's hospitalized, we can go to the hospital. Or if you're out of state, maybe you have to move before the closing, we can send someone remotely out of state as well. We've done it in other countries where we've used something called remote online notary that is referred to as RON. So if you hear that, it's remote online notary, where it's more electronic, and there's certain steps you have to do to be able to use that. But we offer all those services with Nations Title.
Okay, now that's just fabulous. And like I said, starting this journey, wanted to provide the process of step one, getting pre-approved, finding the home, getting the offer accepted, all the inspections, engaging title, what to expect when we're clear to close and we come in the office. And I think we've kind of talked through that process, basically, individual family versus a corporation, okay? And coming in here, getting that knocked out. Usually when you come in, you're assigned a closer if you're in the office.
Yes.
You're assigned a closer. We verify all the paperwork is correct, which I think nowadays we can knock that, if everything's together, we can knock it out in under an hour, right?
Right, yes.
Under an hour. And then once that's over with, and if it is on the seller side, they can elect to, receive a wire transfer. Now, I know because of wire transfer, and we go back to the pandemic where fraud was a big issue, I think you guys have some really strict rules to make sure that the person that's receiving these funds is the indeed participant that's supposed to receive it.
Absolutely. There's different things that we look for during the transaction to make sure that the buyer gets the correct wiring instructions so their funds go to us so we can provide those funds to the seller. And then lastly, that the seller is getting the funds, that they have the appropriate information that we need so it goes directly to the seller's account and it's all legal It's no fraud involved. In fact, this is the one portion, we take the agent out of it.
Right.
When I send out, or my team sends out wiring instructions, we do not want it to go to the agent first and then to you. It will come directly from us. And that cuts down on any transmission of emails. If they're not secured enough or whatever, we know our system's secured. It will get to you securely. We also even ask for another step. Give us a call. We'll read through those numbers with you to make sure you've gotten exactly what you should get to wire your funds to. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I had an incident one time, this has been several years ago. The buyers received something from their agent, what they thought was from their agent. They were going to go wire their funds. It was not from their agent.
Right.
Luckily, they called their agent first. These scammers have so many ways to do so many unique things. We take every precaution to make sure the funds are coming from you securely and going to the seller securely.
Well, and that's great to hear, and you're correct, and it needs to be, and it is. It's a very secure process because as a realtor, as an agent, I will never ask for wire instructions. That's between the title rep, the buyer, and the seller. Okay, so an agent's never going to ask you for that, even if the agent is going to hold the earnest money. The wiring instructions, okay, that's going to be from title and the buyer and seller. So that's something that, the buyers and sellers need to realize that their money is secure.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay? The process is secure. I'm not going to ask you, how did you do this, or when did you do it? Can you give me information to show that you did it? Title will send, the agent information just to let you know the wire was received. And after the transaction, the closing is complete, and I usually go back and I'll ask, if it's a seller, I just want to verify, did you receive your funds from the closing? Yes or no? Because if the funds have not been received, then I will call the title rep and say, what's the process? And sometimes, when they're wiring the funds to bank accounts, sometimes it backs up. It can take a little while, but it usually does happen. So I take fraud very serious, just like you do.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that was really important, something I wanted you to actually stress. So
and the one thing I'll throw out there, if it's okay, in Indiana, there's a law called good funds. And with a buyer, we cannot accept money over $10,000 unless it's in a wire. Okay, so if you're going to do your earnest money, let's say it's $3,500, you can write a check for that. And if it is a personal check, we do have to hold that check for 14 days. So if you're wanting a really quick turnaround and it's a cash deal, we won't be able to do it before those 2 weeks. Now, if you give us a cashier's check, we can do that quicker. But if it's on a personal check, we do have to hold it for 14 days. And the good funds law is that anything over $10,000 or higher has to be via a wire. So you're going to see wires used all the time with any title company. They're secure. You do not have to be afraid. In fact, it's the safest way to do it.
Yeah, and when I'm working with a buyer and they've got to submit the earnest money, I request that they do it on the cashier's check because it's quicker, it's safer. But some buyers prefer to do, a personal check. And if they're in no hurry, we explain to them, like you said, the good funds, it'll be held for 14 days, but a cashier's check, and it just makes it a lot simpler.
Right.
So I appreciate that. And a lot of people, don't understand that, like the amounts. Okay?
Right.
How much to submit, what you're allowed to receive.
Right,
okay?
Exactly.
As a title company, what you're allowed to receive, and is wiring a better option? And I think it is, especially if it's a high amount, because depending on the price point of a home, the earnest money could be $5,000, it could be $10,000. I've been involved in transactions like that as well, and I don't want, like I said, I prefer the title company or the earnest money. So I will request that either they're going to contact you to wire the money, or they're going to personally come to the office to submit their earnest money. And then we will get a copy, to show that the earnest money was actually received.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I appreciate you providing so much information, and I think it's good information for anyone wanting to purchase a home and they don't understand what title does behind the scenes. So I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
This afternoon, you've been so gracious, and this is great information. So everyone, again, I'm Henry with eXp. This is Karen with Nation's Title. As always, if you enjoy my videos, please hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified of new videos that we put out. Again, we try to put them out on a weekly basis when time allows. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call at 317-445-5296, but also leave comments below if you have any questions. So thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.